guys, Mike Nordstrom here, MSN, at the LA Convention in California. Having a blast with Russell here, everybody. Met a lot of guys on there I've sold to on the auctions, and found some great cars here, taking home, some are flipping. Getting ready to go in the room now. We're going to race some cars down the track and have some fun.
My boss said, they're going to be working on a car project upstairs, and you seem to like cars. Why don't you go to the meeting? And my daily driver was a 1930 Ford Coupe. So I go to the meeting. Elliot Handler, the president of the corporation, Jack Ryan, the executive VP of design, Harry Bradley, the first designer, I'm sorry, two other people, I keep forgetting who they were, and myself at this meeting. On the wall were little shelves of every die-cast car that was available to buy at the time. Tootsie, Matchbox, Gorky, and everybody else I'm forgetting. And the question was about making die-cast cars. What could Mattel do that they're not doing? And all of those cars, the common denominator were that you set on a table with hard rubber tires and you pushed them around. Mattel is in the toy business. In the toy business, the toy has to have play value, not just something that you look at. So that was the discussion, is what can we do that they're not doing, and what could we bring to the market that's brand new? You start brainstorming with outrageous, stupid ideas. Well, finally somebody said, well, what if they went real fast? What if they did this? Because those cars didn't move. I wish it was me. It wasn't me on this deal. But they took one of the models off the shelves. There were dozens of shelves. Took it to the model shop and made nylon bearings for it, and took it over to Elliot Handler's office, set it on his conference table, flicked it, and it shot across the table. And Elliot said, that's what I'm looking for. And that was the birth of Hot Wheels. So then, Harry Bradley was already hired as a full-time employee, and all the staff was in position to work on this project. So the first 16 cars, the Sweet 16, were decided what they're going to do. In those days, it was long before electronic patterns. So pattern makers, such as talents of Jack Hargraves and some of those guys, all European trained pattern makers, we started making patterns for the products. And I started making the prototype cars so you could set them on the table and just say, yeah, we like that or we don't like that. Almost everything I did in the model shop sat on the table for a few minutes, and when the meeting was over, they just disappeared. In fact, I made about a half a dozen one-to-one brass prototypes just to run them on the track to see how they performed on the track. Did I ever think of keeping one of those? No, because I never thought a toy was going to last more than 2 or 3 years. Bob Rose kept them, but I didn't keep any. I didn't keep any of the early prototypes. And I wouldn't have had one Hot Wheels if it wasn't for Larry when he did a Hot Wheels in my car, my Model T truck that's here at the hotel. And he tossed it to me, and I packed it up and put it in a box while I moved to the East Coast. If it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't have any Hot Wheels.
But they had spools and spools of this wire. And part of it was, if you could find a way to use the wire in this car, it'd be great. Well, some engineer came up with the great idea of the little bent wire torsion suspension. And so that's where all that leftover wire finally got to be used. It was sitting in the back of the warehouse. It was used for Mickey Mouse guitars.
Jack Hargraves was the first pattern maker, and he couldn't keep up. And Jack and I worked next to each other, and I would do some of the stuff for his stuff, and we couldn't keep up together. So they flew him to Hong Kong to start a model shop in Hong Kong, where the first production started. And he's trying to train Chinese to make American cars, which was humorous in itself. But they got so far behind. Jack went over there for about 3 or 4 weeks, and ended up staying, I think it was about 6 months, sitting at the model shop, which is also interesting. When they started making the first patterns, there was no track. When Jack's in Hong Kong, and somebody came up with the idea of the track. So the first shots out of the mold, the cars wouldn't, couple of the cars wouldn't make it through the loop because the bumpers dragged. So they had to go back in and modify the tooling so they get the car to perform on the track. And also in the very beginning, there wasn't a name Hot Wheels. We didn't have a name. And somebody, 50 years, my memory is not what it used to be, but somebody, when they saw that car shoot down the track, they said, boy, those are some Hot Wheels. And that's where the name Hot Wheels came from in the early days. Jack Hargraves, the model shop was divided into 5 groups, and one group kind of worked on patterns. And there were 8 of them in the beginning. And after even having 8 pattern makers in the US and in Hong Kong, they're barely enough to keep up those first 16 cars. I'm still, as I'm sitting here looking at you, and some of you I've met before, the diehard collectors and Bruce, and in my wildest imagination, I never expected a little toy that didn't do much of anything to last 3 or 4 years would be astounding. But for 50 years, and to be as popular as it is, I'll tell you how popular it is. One year I saved Hot Wheels, so I had a box full of them for Halloween. So the kids come to the front door, instead of candy, I'm getting them Hot Wheels. Well, the night ran its course, and I locked up and shut the lights off, and a few minutes later there's a knock at the door. So I open the door, and there's a little kid, Hot Wheels age kid, and he says, trick or treat, and halfway to the sidewalk is his dad standing there. And I drop a Hot Wheels in his bag, and the kid says, oh, cool. And Dad looked up at me and he said, or said to his son, he said, what'd you get, son? And he said, I got a Hot Wheels. And he looked at, Dad looked up at me and said, can I have a Hot Wheels too?
Howard?
So
First place again today.
Did you?
Howard,
Well, Larry, all right. He's
I'll
the
test
new.
your memory, Howard. I have a drawing that you made back in 1969 of the noodle head, but it had an alternative name. Do you remember the name that you were going to call it?
You tell me.
Chrome Dome.
That's right.
Chrome Dome or noodle head, and I
All
guess
that
somebody
nice
marked me.
chrome up there made nice and
Yeah.
heavy.
Larry-
Yeah. So you did it again?
First place Noodlehead this morning.
What's that, 10 years?
Wow.
Is that 10?
At Randy's convention, we did have the Hot Wheels designer race. And of course, you know why I'm bringing this up, because I won it. It was me, Larry, and Michael Hurley.
luck.
No, I had Scott Tupper fill that thing with epoxy and lead shot.
Well,
Give me the same car.
could be.
I know where he's going.
Full scale car. I'd say one of my all time favorites is a Shelby Cobra. It's to me, it's like the ultimate car. I mean, it's all performance. It's very aggressive, and it's always been benchmarked even with modern cars. They always benchmark and still reference a Cobra, a car that's been built 60 years ago. It's got a lot of famous story. It's been the most replicated car in the world, licensed, unlicensed, and it's just really cool. I probably won't have one because I burn. I was born with red hair, and the sun just beats me up, so I need a roof.
No, you need a Daytona.
Daytona is another story. That may be an option.
Best.
Yes, and yeah, so like that. And then otherwise, I mean, I love muscle cars. I love most of them. Pontiacs, Plymouth, Dodge, Chevy, Ford, AMC. I'm a fan of most of them.